You think you might be having a bad day, folks? What about a guy that has missed a $100 move in a stock and he still says sell? We've got that for you on the Rebel's Edge right after this. Bang! Well, Pete, I'm thinking you're still in Florida. Is that right?
I am indeed. I'm enjoying it. You look like you're parts unknown.
I'm on a Virgin Voyages.
Cool.
I'm speaking to a mastermind group out here at sea, and we were in Tortola yesterday, Pete. We're in Guadalupe today. I think Barbados tomorrow. It's one of their newest ships. It's called the Valiant Lady. And I tell you what, Branson is killing it with this. And by the way, Pete, we were over at Necker Island yesterday, which is pretty dang cool. I guess he bought it in the 70s for $180,000, and now he charges $110 a night, $110,000 a night, that is. But for that, you get 48 rooms. No, 24 rooms, 48 people.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I wish I was a cruiser, John. My wife's not really into it, but because of different reasons. But God, I'd love to do it. I think it looks great. Well, I was sitting around watching all these boats when I'm out here, even, that are, I call them boats. They're ships, I realize it, but holy smokes, they look beautiful. They're cities on the water.
Oh, yeah. This one's 17 stories tall, Pete. Like a couple dozen restaurants and unbelievable gyms and all that stuff, multiple swimming pool. I mean, just crazy. Don't worry, folks. We'll make sure we do a Rebellion cruise maybe in 2025.
I like it.
But it's pretty cool, pretty special. All right, let's talk about this, Pete. He is, of course, Pete Najarian, and I'm Jon Najarian. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we break down the top stock stories, as well as the macro minute and fantastic futures, and sprinkle in a bit of Pete's expertise from the sports side of things. And I try to fill in the blanks for anything he might miss, but he doesn't miss much. Anyway, let's talk, Pete, about macro minute, because macro minute, we're going to give it 1 minute. You see it there on the clock, folks. I'm saying that is CPI, which comes our way tomorrow. We know the Fed pays attention to this. They're thinking it's still going to be flat with January's reading of 3.1, Pete. But if it isn't, if it's hotter than that, that's going to throw a monkey wrench into things, and we might reverse even lower than today's drop.
And I think there's no other place to go other than what you just point out, John, the CPI. It's something that everybody's going to be looking at. We all know how much the Fed is now in front of everything. I mean, the news stories are always start with the Fed or Powell or somebody else from the Fed commenting or whatever. And I think this is exactly right. They're looking at these inflation numbers. Obviously, that's something that is really triggering markets. And by the way, you and I pointed this out to some people. Recently, we've had a pretty decent drop in the 10-year as well. So we've watched it go from 4.3 all the way down to just over 4. And that's a pretty substantial move. So obviously, that is something that's going to be a huge influence as we get a little bit closer to tomorrow.
Very true. And we will keep an eye on it. And all of you will know just as we do as soon as that news breaks. And it could either help or hurt the market. Let's talk, Pete, about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
That was fantastic futures, man, going across there. Pete, my futures are still going to be Bitcoin. They were last week as well. We traded through 71, then $72,000 USD to each Bitcoin. And you and I were talking a little bit about it, Pete, as far as, hey, it's a $69 stock that goes to 72. This isn't quite the same as NVIDIA when it made that $100 move last week. This is a $3 move for a $69 stock. You're going to buy 1,000 shares. Most of us are for any of these stocks. So what's the diff? if it goes up $3 and everybody gets all crazy, like, oh, this is running away. No, not really. It's just being accumulated. The UK regulators, Pete, said that they might approve a crypto-linked security. So, in other words, an ETF or their version of it. And that's what's lifting things today.
And it's been on a great path all year, John. And specifically, it's really started to rocket. Once it got over that 45,000, 50,000 level, and then before we could blink, practically, we're at 60. Here we are now at 70, 72,000 to be correct. I'm going to throw out VIX to you, John. The 2024 today, we've got the highest measure of the VIX this year for 2024. We're well over 16 at one point. Now we could ease back off of that, which is basically the highest level since going back all the way to the latter part of October last year. So interesting to see that. I'm not totally shocked. I would expect to see that right now based upon not just what's going on with Bitcoin, but what's going on with Bitcoin, AI, a lot of different things right now. It makes a lot of sense to me that we're seeing that VIX just kind of elevate a little bit more each and every day.
And not surprising because of that big turn we talked about in NVIDIA. When you've got that, one of the biggest cap stocks in the world, and certainly one of the Magnificent Seven, when it dropped $90 in 30 minutes, Pete, that was one of the reasons I think they finally said, you know what, we need to move the VIX up a little bit. It might not be where it needs to be to reflect the risk in the market.
Yeah.
By the way, Bitcoin, folks, is up 71% year to date. And Pete and I took a quick look at it, 255% year over year. So performance has definitely been there, but it's a volatile currency, if we want to call it that, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at some of the stock stories of the day, Pete. And we're going to stick with Bitcoin and say Coinbase, because Coinbase, MicroStrategy, they're both in there. Michael Saylor bought another $800 million worth of Bitcoin. His stock symbol is MSTR. He is the CEO. 800 million more, Pete. So that puts him over 210,000 Bitcoins, I believe. What a run. And then you've got Barclays. Some guy at Barclays said, you know what, Coinbase, I'm going to talk about it. And even though I've been dead wrong, I'm going to maintain my underweight and my price target for Coinbase at 146. Well, more or less 100 points higher than that right now.
They hit a 52-week high today, John, probably all-time high, 271.47. So he's off by a little bit, I would say, right now. Fundamentally, when you look at Coinbase, John, you've got, a free cash flow of $1.5 billion. You've got cash to debt at $2 billion. And you've got some shorts out there, the people that are betting against this, maybe the guys that are following around the analyst that's so bearish on this name. That gets a little bit ugly. And it is a big, big move to the upside. Obviously, it's moving around a lot each and every day. It's something that we've definitely, identified pretty well. And as you brought up the MicroStrategy, that MSTR, that one's very interesting to me, John, because let's be honest. I mean, it's because of the investment side of what Michael Saylor is doing that is just propping this thing up. So it's a great way to kind of mirror what's going on, not perfectly, of course, but mirror what's going on with Bitcoin because of the fact that that's what's moving this stock right now. It's incredible because when you look at some of the others that were moving, they're not moving every single day, the marathons and the riots and whatever. They're not tracking it exactly, but you look at MSTR or something like that, maybe Coinbase, you are seeing something that's tracking Bitcoin a lot closer.
Yeah. And by the way, those charts that you were seeing in the center of your screen, folks, that's from our artificial intelligence offering at Market Rebellion. It's called Rebel Research, and it's $19 a month. So Jared's going to be flipping in some of those charts because it does technical analysis, fundamental analysis, and sentiment analysis. And it does it on 35,000 stocks. Mm-hmm. So anything we talk about, literally, it can just pop up like that. All right, Pete, let's switch gears over to Choice Hotels. So this is Wyndham and a whole bunch of other brands. But stock's up about 5.5% against a down market today. How does that happen? Well, they added 5 million shares to their repurchase. And they say that they think they've got the right board right now to continue to grow this company from 9,200 hotels. So I think those are two big reasons why we're seeing the stock move to the upside when the market's moving the opposite.
And that is something that we've seen more and more of, John, is these repurchase programs, and people very much excited about seeing that. And this is a pretty big elevation. Five billion is a nice number to get this thing all the way up to 6.8 million, rather million. I said billion, million, the 6.8 million. So it's a major deal that they're going through right here. This is a company that, does it sound exciting? Probably not to a lot of folks out there, but it's making a pretty good move today. And I think that's important. Also, there's some large shorts in here, John. About 8 or 10% of the shares outstanding are shorted. So you've got a high volume day. You're getting a nice move to the upside. You've got this repurchase program that's going into play. I think there's a lot of things to like about Choice right now.
Yeah. And, people continue to want experiences, Pete. And with 9,200 hotels around the world, I think you got a lot of choice with Choice Hotels.
Yep.
All right. Let's go to natural gas producer EQT because they're going to buy former unit of Equitrans Midstream, ETRN, for basically $5.5 billion. So this is a big deal. It'll send that stock higher, and it is sending EQT lower so far today, Pete. It's Marcellus Shale, as well as what they can pull out of Appalachia and all the rest, as well as the Gulf Coast. This is a pretty big deal for nat gas, despite the fact that the administration is trying to put on hold any future exports from the United States, that is, exports of natural gas.
Yeah, the company EQT struggled a little bit in the first quarter, John, of this year, but I think that there's something very, very promising going out into the future. And one of the things that was talked about when they were talking about this particular deal, and it's a $5.5 billion deal, so this is nothing to sneeze at. What I think is really interesting, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'm looking at it, John, and one of the things they mentioned was the burst in need for energy because of AI, and that's something that folks have talked about for a very long time. But the amount of energy that's needed, well, now they can deliver that amount of energy that they need, and it's obviously going to continue to grow. I think this is a reason to maybe take a nice, long, hard look at EQT, because potentially, I think that if we all believe in what's going on here and the demand from AI, this is just another one. And I don't think it's just words being thrown out about AI. This makes a heck of a lot of sense right now.
Yeah. Well, natural gas is something Pete has mentioned numerous times on the show, folks. So pull up some of the former episodes and check that out. It certainly got some of the companies that are involved with natural gas, either pipelines or going in exploration and pulling it out of the ground, Pete, certainly put a lot of those back in focus as values to both of us, I think. All right, now let's finish up, Pete, with Moderna, mRNA. So, it has basically the symbol, the stock symbol of what they are. And Moderna announced they were going to lay off a bunch of people. They didn't say exactly how many, but they said they're going to lay off people. Their revenue, Pete, was in 2022, $19 billion. That's sales, of course. Guess what it's predicted to be in 2024 by them? $4 billion. That's how bad it's been to not have people going out and getting the shot, getting the jab, because basically almost zero people right now, Pete, are going out and getting that. And so now they got to depend on other things. The good news for Moderna, and another reason it's up today, is they've got other levers to pull, right, Pete?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly where I was going to go, John, is the beautiful thing about this company is they've got great cash and cash flow, and that part's been great. Although the cash flow now has fallen apart as well because of what you're talking about, because of everything that was happening during the coronavirus era that we've just come through. But so now they're at a cash burn of $2.5 billion. Things can flip pretty quickly. And that's one of the things that has flipped in a big way for them. I'm glad you pointed out that revenue thing from 2022 to 2024. That's an amazing number, right? 22 billion to 4 billion. I mean, that says a lot, but they do have an absolutely incredible pipeline. And I think that's a reason to maybe at least keep this on the radar. I'm not saying it's something that we all jump on right now, but it's between 62 and 163 bucks is what the 52-week low and high are. It's sitting right in the middle at 112. If this gets sold off at all, I do think it's something well worth looking at because their pipeline is deep across multiple different areas right now, John. So that's something I would keep a close eye on is how are they doing? Have they got enough in phase 3? And where is the stock trading right now? And if it gets too much lower, I think there's a great opportunity there.
That November low, about 63 or 64, certainly seems like that was a tremendous do, Pete.
Yeah.
And that was down 55% for that year, for last year, for it to be there. Just an incredible drop. But like Pete said, with any kind of success for Keytruda, that's a Merck product, of course, but Keytruda can be enhanced with cocktails, and Moderna is one of the folks making those cocktails. All right. Well, Pete, last week you were talking about Minnesota high school hockey and how big it is. And I think you've maybe not so much joked, but you've said, you know what? The Minnesota girls team could probably beat just about every other state's boys team.
Yep.
Because they're that good too. That's what happens when you learn to skate before you can walk, apparently. But let's take a look at this video, folks, of the Minnesota Wild Stadium packed for the state high school championship. That's a pro hockey arena, folks, and you can't get a seat.
17,000 people go to every single, and John, there are multiple games per day and guys go in and, you know, it's unbelievable the support that they've got. It is really an amazing thing to watch. And you're seeing a lot of players that, quite frankly, they could go right into the NHL from high school. Many of them get drafted, but there's a process in hockey that they go through. A lot of them go to juniors, then they go to college, and then they come back out, and then they go off. And everybody's going to have a different path, but that's probably the most common. But I'll tell you, we were lucky enough, John, to have the Chanhassen, one of the schools, the Chanhassen coach on with us yesterday on Sunday. And we were just talking about just how incredible it is, the crowds, how you have to calm down the players because they're so excited. But can you imagine at 16, 17, 18 years old having to play in front of 17,000 people and show everybody what you can do and everything? It's really an amazing thing to watch, and it's really a lot of fun. All right, so we're going to go to the NFL now.
Okay.
How about this, John? We've talked about Russell Wilson, the trade, probably the worst trade ever, at least so far. There's going to be others, and we might even be able to point right to Carolina, which is a factor in a lot of the commentary you and I will have about sports right now. But how about this? The Denver Broncos are going to eat $38 million that they're going to have to pay to Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson for $1.2 million signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So not such a bad deal for Pittsburgh, right? It opens up that opportunity. I think it's really an amazing thing. It was something that, you know, everybody was trying to speculate, where's Russell Wilson going to really go, right? I mean, there's a lot of different places that he could go. If Minnesota loses, you know, Kirk Cousins because of money, maybe he goes to Minnesota. Maybe he goes to Atlanta. Maybe he goes to a lot of these different places. But you can understand for $1.2 million why, if you're Pittsburgh, even at 36, 37, 38 years old, whatever he is right now, John, he's probably got something left in the tank. And he could have a pretty interesting, I think he went through long nights on Friday going through everything with the team. And the next thing you know, they signed him up and they said, done deal. There's another one out there. Baker Mayfield just signed. Last year, he was playing for some ridiculously low amount for the Buccaneers. Had probably one of his best years, John. He had, what did he have? 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. That's not bad. 64% completion. That's not so bad. And here's a guy now that just signed a 3-year, $100 million deal. Who's getting the best deal right now in terms of the fans? Is it the fans of Pittsburgh? Is it the fans of Tampa? I'll throw in Mac Jones because that one's just crazy. Mac Jones, John, when he came out in 2021, he was the 15th pick. He's now playing underneath the number 1 pick. And the trade, it was a big barn burner of a trade. They traded a 6th-round pick to be able to get Mac Jones down there to Jacksonville, down there playing behind Trevor. So I don't know. It just shows you how many misses there are, John, and how difficult it is in the NFL to find the right quarterbacks for the right teams. But what do you think about what's going on? And is there anybody that you're watching close? Is it Kirk Cousins, or who are you looking at right now?
Well, you and I had talked, Pete, about a whole bunch of this stuff. Kenny Pickett looks like he's going to be out in Pittsburgh. I don't think they're just bringing Russell in to tutor him. They're bringing Russell in to play. And Pickett, they've pretty much given up on that guy, it seems. And they may have given up on him the same way the Bears may or may not give up on Justin Fields, Pete. I think both those players are better than the offensive coordinators that have tried to direct their play. I'm not positive that you agree with me on that, but man, I haven't seen much out of Pittsburgh, and certainly I didn't see crap out of Chicago in terms of the way they developed Justin Fields. But I will say that Mac Jones, that one is a surprise, Pete, even though we both probably thought, he's worn out his welcome, even though the coach is now gone because Belichick is out. They hate to admit that kind of defeat, but, he was on a championship team, Pete, down there in Bama, and just never really showed it in the pros.
No, and it's too bad. And they showed the value that they put him at with the 6th round. When you consider the fact he was the 15th pick in the draft, and now you're getting a 6th rounder, and we're only talking about 3 years ago. That's somebody who's saying, you know what, we really missed out. I don't know if you remember this, John, but one of the things that was a little bit odd from Belichick was when he took his defensive coordinator and moved him over to offensive coordinator and tried to work it out that way with Patricia, who ended up going to Detroit, then coming back. But that was always an interesting move, but I don't know that it worked. And to your point, I think you're right. I think these offensive coordinators sometimes just aren't what they need to be for the players that they've got. I think the world of Justin Fields, by the way. I'm one of the guys who buys into the fact that he's actually the right guy for Chicago. And will he stay? So that's where we'll jump next, John. So right now, Chicago's got the first pick in the draft because of that wonderful Carolina trade that's just as bad as Russell Wilson down there with Young. So that one's kind of interesting. They also have pick number 9. So what makes that whole thing even more interesting is they can do some trading, John. And I think with some of the trades that they put up there, I mean, here's a great example of how much this is going to bring in terms of number 1 pick. Because a lot of teams right now need a quarterback, and they've got to get in the right spot. And most of these teams seem to think Caleb Williams is the guy, right? Whether you and I think so or not, that's who they're all going for. So Arizona's got the 4th pick in the draft. Now, they would flip picks. So Chicago then gets the 4th pick, and they still have the 9th pick. Then they've got the 2025 first-round pick, and then they've got 2024, a 3rd-round pick. So they're starting to amass something so similar, John, in a lot of ways to what Houston did and how they just built this team just out of the draft last year and how incredibly fast that can happen. I think if the Bears coaching staff is pretty decent, they can make something like that happen. Here was the best of them all, though. So Atlanta, if they trade, John, they give them the 8th pick. They've already got the 9th pick. They give them a 2025 first rounder, a 2024 second and third rounder, and a 2025 second rounder. That's the kind of trade that could make the Chicago Bears something very, very close to what we've seen, not just in down there with the Texans, but maybe even something that's building a team that looks something like San Francisco or some of these other unbelievable teams, John, because when you get those kind of picks and now you've got money to spend and the cap went up, we talked about that last week, there's a lot of reasons. If I'm a Bears fan out there, I would get pretty daggone excited about what could happen with this first round pick.
Yeah, they could do a lot. And it just depends, if people believe that they'd be willing to trade down or if they're just going to take Caleb Williams instead and blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of chess being played and a lot of money, because it's always money with the Chicago Bears. And And one of the things, about that Mac Jones trade, Pete, not, they basically got a bag of balls for the guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, so Bryce Young, Bama. Mac Jones, Bama. Who is the last really big player to come out and light things up in Bama? There have been a few. Jalen Hurts and the guy who followed him up, Pete, Tua.
Yeah.
And both of them are big, strong guys. Bryce was not that. Bryce is slightly built. I don't think he's built for the NFL kind of punishment that these quarterbacks take, even though they protect them as some of the quarterbacks like Terry Bradshaw would say, yeah, that put a skirt on him. There's a lot to be said about the hits that guys like Bradshaw or Marino took, or some of the guys you played with, Pete, down in Tampa or, Minnesota, Seattle, the Raiders. A lot of these other quarterbacks took tremendous shots. They don't take the same shots now, but if you're 180 pounds, you're really not in a good spot when some 240 pounders coming down on you, whether it's a linebacker or a 265-pound edge rusher or whatever it is. Jalen Hurts, he can handle it. Obviously, Stroud, because he's Ohio State, so they're used to being pounded, because what do? They run the ball, and then he throws some. And that'll be interesting to see. If Marvin Harrison Jr., Pete, if he's got a Bears jersey on, that's going to be a really good day. And I'm sure he's hoping he's not drafted by the Bears, except for the fact that his old quarterback would be pitching him the ball. Well, but he's already been a pro for 3 years, so he wasn't really throwing a lot of balls to Marvin Harrison, Pete, at Ohio State. But this is his 4th year as a pro, Russell. I'm sorry, Justin Fields. And I think he's due, and hopefully they have a good coordinator for him, Pete, so then you could plug in those picks that you say that they'll have so many of and grab some of the top talent in the draft, because it's pretty deep this year.
Yeah, I would say the last thing I'd say on the sports side of things or whatever, you and I both played, we both understand the game, and there are some quarterbacks out there that are system quarterbacks, right? I mean, the system of Alabama, it used to be the system of USC. You can't hardly name a quarterback who had success at the next level from USC. It's really hard to find names like that. But they were great teams, and they had great players all around them, running backs, tight ends, receivers, offensive line, everything, very much like what Alabama has created now. So the difficult thing, I think, for these general managers is trying to figure out, is this guy good because of the system he's in, or is this guy good because he's that good? And that's where I think these swings and misses, you're seeing more and more of that, because there are a lot of system quarterbacks out there. And that's what's really difficult, but that's why they've got the job of GM. They have to make that decision. And if they're wrong, they should be fired.
Yeah, well, what do you do with a guy like Tepper? What do you do? It's kind of like Sound of Music, Pete. What do you do with a girl like Maria? I mean, Tepper's the problem there. It wasn't the coach.
Yeah.
He thinks it was the coach. It wasn't the coach. It was him. The coach wanted Stroud, CJ Stroud. Didn't want Bryce.
Well, the tough thing is, sometimes when you're out on a ship, sometimes you kind of get the signal goes in and out and in and out. But I will tell you this, we are going out, but catch us tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be back then with everything on the Rebels Edge.